Welcome to PDX Stew. On today's episode, it's just your man, G Money, cooking it up solo style. We'll be learning, sharing, and growing closer than we ever thought possible. We'll have some far-out sounds from electronic artist Consumer, and we'll take a look outside at why we love it here with a video from local artist Ian Langenhausen. Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of PDX Stew. It's just your man G Money here in the home kitchen in the Montevilla neighborhood. So normally on the show we like to have a guest cook beside me here. Today it's just me here, and I thought I would take an opportunity to tell you a little bit more about myself. I grew up cooking with my mom, and she was always kind of chasing me out of the kitchen. Cooking's really all I've ever really done as a profession. It's something I'm really passionate about. It really makes my day to see people enjoying a meal and coming together. I'm also kind of a recovering goth kid. I was a goth kid in high school, and I like a lot of metal and sort of gritty, grimy art and that kind of aesthetic, right? I never really grew out of it. People kind of know that about me. I'm pretty upfront. One thing they're a little surprised to learn when they know those other things is I'm also a huge sports nut. People think jocks are really big sports nuts, and I've never been a jock. The one way I know to bring all that stuff together for a really good time is Goth Game Snatch! We're gonna start by making a kick-you-in-the-face chili. So we've already taken the time to cook up some bacon, and we've done it in the same pot that we're gonna make the chili in. I've taken some of the fat from that bacon, and we're gonna hold on to that for later. I've got the pot that I was cooking that bacon in, and it is good and warm. And inside of here, we've still got a good amount of that bacon fat moving around. And that's how we're gonna start cooking. This is a 90% lean beef, and that's going in there with all that bacon fat. So when our beef is in the pot, we wanna hit it with a little bit of salt and a little bit of fresh black pepper, and kind of just move that around on that frying bacon grease. We're also going to season that with some cayenne pepper, some chili powder, and lots of it. We're going to add chili powder at almost every phase of this chili. And some cumin powder. I put it on all kinds of things, but it really complements beef. So we're going to let that sit on a medium heat and just keep stirring it until the meat's nice and brown and we get a really good smell coming in the kitchen. So in the meantime, we're going to talk about our mushrooms. These are going to be some super sinful mushrooms for your goth game party. So all I've done here is cleaned off the tops with a paper towel and then popped the stems off. You just give it a little tug, and most of the time they come out real clean. And that's what we're after, is that nice hollow center on these guys. So we get those nice and prepped up, and those are going to be ready to fill in a little while. And we're going to work with a Vidalia onion on this guy. So a Vidalia onion is nice. It's a little bit different from a regular yellow onion because it's a little sweeter. And so we're just going to chop this up, and we're only going to take about half of it. And we're going to dice it down nice and fine because we want to make sure that when it's cooked, it can fit inside of our mushrooms. So I just go across and then back over to make a nice small dice. So I've got a pan over here that's getting a little warm. And I'm going to throw about a teaspoon of butter in there, and that's going to be to saute our onions. Eventually we're going to be caramelizing these onions, and I always do that in butter because it adds a nice flavor. So our onions are about set to go into that pan. The butter's nice and melted, and we'll just put those right in. To help sweat out some of the juice from those onions, which will help them caramelize, I'm just going to hit it with a little bit of salt, and that's going to help extract the moisture out of those onions. So back over at our beef, it's ready to give it a stir. We're just a little bit away from all that meat being nice and brown. With our onions, we're going to be putting in some sun-dried tomatoes. Now these sun-dried tomatoes have been soaked in olive oil, so they're nice and tender. I've got 7 sun-dried tomatoes here, and I'm just going to chop these up. And we'll put those back into the bowl that the oil was in to go back into our onions in a little while. So we can see our meat is fully browned here, and we're just going to get that meat out of there and drain off some of that fat. And that can go right back onto the stove. So our meat's here going to drain a little bit. We're going to take some of that juice that's collecting in there. That's good stuff. That's pork and beef fat melted together. We're going to add a little bit of that back to the pot. We're going to set this meat aside
for a little later, and we'll come back to it when we're ready to finish up the chili. Now you can't make a good chili without a few nice spicy peppers to really punch you in the mouth to make this mosh pit chili. We got 2 jalapeno peppers here. I've got a poblano pepper that I've pulled the seeds out of. I've got 1 whole red bell pepper, and here's 2 serranos. Now the serrano peppers and the jalapenos are gonna add a lot of heat, so I left the seeds in those because that's where the heat is gonna come from mostly. I've also got a whole yellow onion and about 4 cloves of garlic. Now this is gonna go right into the pot where we've got our warm, meaty fat. We're gonna stir that around to get it coated with the beef and bacon fat that's all mixed together in there. We're gonna hit that with some salt to help the sweating process. It's gonna pull the moisture. And as I said, every step of the way, we're gonna add a good dose of chili powder. And when those start to soften up, we'll add a little bit more seasoning because they'll be a little bit more porous and they'll be able to pull all that flavor into them. Now if we come back over here, we can see our onions are starting to get a nice color on them. I kept it up high at first to give them a little bit of char. That's going to add a really good flavor because of the sweetness of these Vidalia onions. And then I lowered the heat, and you can see they're starting to get a nice caramelized color on them. We've got the sun-dried tomatoes are going to go in. Here I've got about 2 tablespoons of fresh chopped basil and a tablespoon of fresh thyme. These are all going to go into the pan. We're going to incorporate those into the mix. We're going to turn our heat up because it's going to get real exciting in this pan pretty soon. So we'll go ahead and stir our chili veggies around one more time. I can already see them kind of starting to get a glassy texture on their surface. And that means they're starting to soften up and become porous. And they're going to start to hold the flavors of the spices we're adding a little bit better. So with the onions and sun-dried tomatoes and the fresh herbs, you can see I'm starting to get some sizzle in that pan. So we're going to go ahead and add about a half a cup of red wine. We're going to keep that heat pretty warm because now we're going to want to reduce that down so that the wine gets fully pulled into all those vegetables. So our veggies are pretty much ready to go here. You can see they're nice and glassy. So now that they're good and glassy and they're really porous, we can go ahead and add more spices. So we're going to add a little bit more cayenne. We're going to add another tablespoon of chili powder, a little bit more cumin, and then we'll add some salt to that. The great thing about making a good pot of chili is it's hard to mess it up with spices. Don't over season and you're probably going to be okay. Our onions and sun-dried tomatoes with the fresh herbs and red wine, that's perfect and that's ready to go. So we're going to take this mix and set it aside, get it out of the pan because we want to chill this down so that we can add it to our mushrooms in a little while. So I'm going to go ahead and pop that in the fridge. So with our veggies nice and glassy and fully seasoned, we're going to bring the meat back into them. So there's our ground beef, and that's going back into the pot. We'll stir that around, and we want to get all these flavors nice and married together, so we're going to drop this heat pretty low. We're going to ask that meat to pull a little bit more fat. We're going to throw a lid on it and just let that happen. In the meantime, we're going to take a quick break. Why don't you guys take a look at something else? welcome back to PDX Stew. Let's take a look at the chili. That is nice and cooked. You can still see there's some nice glisten, plenty of fat still going on in there. We're at a point here where we can add our tomato product. I typically work with canned tomatoes. They're really easy, really fast and convenient, and usually really affordable. So I've got 2 cans of crushed tomatoes here. Those are 12-ounce cans. And I've got 2 12-ounce cans of diced tomatoes. Now over the top of this, we're gonna add some great American whiskey, because what's rock and roll without whiskey? That's how things are fueled properly in this country. So we're gonna go ahead and add about a half a cup of American bourbon right to that pot. And then we're gonna add a little bit of water, probably about a cup and a half, just enough to cover everything up. Now that we've got all of our liquids in there, we're gonna go ahead and add some more chili powder. That's another whole tablespoon. And now we're gonna add some dried thyme as well. We add dried thyme after the liquids. Any dried herbs you wanna add to any soups or stews or anything, you add it after you add all your liquids so that it doesn't dry out any further and it'll carry the flavor throughout the rest of the food. And we're just gonna get that mixed around. Cover that and bring it up to a boil. So that's coming to a nice boil now. We can see a lot of movement in the pot. We're just gonna give that another stir around. I can tell by how much of the surface of the meat I can see, I wanna add a little bit more water. We wanna keep that covered. So I'm gonna add another cup of water here. We can always come back to this and add more water. We're gonna be seasoning, which means adding more salt and adding more water throughout the process, because chili takes a while to cook. So as it cooks, it's gonna keep reducing and enriching that flavor even more. So we're gonna go ahead and drop our heat down, and we're gonna add some tomato paste. Tomato paste is a great thickener for this kind of thing, and it really makes the flavor nice and rich. So I've got about 8 ounces here, and that's just going right into the pot. We're gonna make sure that gets mixed around a little bit. You'll notice when you're working with tomato paste, it doesn't always break up right away when you start to stir it. That's okay. As long as you get it well in there, it'll break apart over time as it continues to cook. So we'll throw a lid on that, bring that heat down to a medium low, and we're gonna walk away and just let that do its thing. We're gonna come back to our sinful mushrooms. Now what makes these so sinful? Lots of fat, lots of alcohol, and lots of heat. It's gonna be great. So we prepped up our mushrooms earlier by cleaning off the tops and pulling the stems out. And here, I've got about 8 ounces of blue cheese. That's just gonna go right into a bowl, and we're gonna throw the tomatoes with the onions and the red wine right in there. And we're just gonna mix that up. So now we've got a great filling for each of our mushrooms. Now for each mushroom, we're gonna wanna add a little bit of olive oil. So I just take my olive oil and dab a paper towel with it, and we're just gonna go over the outside surface of each mushroom. That's gonna add some moisture since we're gonna throw these in the oven, and it's gonna keep them from sticking to the pan and from drying out. Now for each of these sinful mushrooms, we're gonna add about a teaspoon to a teaspoon and a half of our filling and get it nicely packed inside of there. We can mound it up over the top because it's gonna melt down a little bit around the mushroom as it cooks. Next, we're gonna get started on our guacamole. Any good guacamole starts with some nice ripe avocados. Now in this bowl, I've just got a couple of peeled, halved avocados. There's 3 in here. We're gonna add another one. Now, splitting and peeling out an avocado is not very hard. I usually like to have a sharp knife, start right at the top, cut right in until you hit the pit. I can't go any further. Now I'm just gonna rotate the avocado around my knife, and they come right out. And then these can scoop right out once you get that pit out, and they just pop right into the bowl. I'm gonna give those a quick, simple mash. I like to use a really wide surface paddle to really get in there and break them apart. We're gonna be adding some other things that are gonna add some liquid that are gonna help these mash up as well. I've got half of a red onion, nice and diced. I've got about a 1/4 cup of cilantro. To this, we're gonna add some Roma tomatoes. Now, when I work the Roma tomatoes in here, I like to pull the seeds out. So to do that, I'll cut the end off and just split them in half. And then if you can find where the seed is inside of the fruit, you can just go in a nice circle and pull that whole seed pocket right out. We're gonna add 4 Roma tomatoes, trimmed and seeded. And then I'll just come back and dice these. All right, so there's all of our tomatoes. And those can go right into the bowl over the top. And stir. We've got that crispy bacon that we started our in-your-face chili with. That's gonna go right into the guac. We also reserved some of that bacon fat that we cooked the bacon in originally from the chili. We're gonna take about, I don't know, maybe a tablespoon of that and go right over the top. We're gonna work that in a little bit. Now, we're gonna add some super heat. So I've got some chipotle peppers here in an adobo sauce. You can get these at any grocery store. They usually come in little cans. Chipotle peppers are wonderful. They're smoked jalapeno peppers. So now we've got all that fully incorporated in there. We're gonna go ahead and season it. Just a little salt and pepper. Kind of bring all those flavors to life. And we're just gonna take the juice of a couple of limes right over the top. The great thing about this is it's going to add a really nice flavor, but it's also going to dull a little bit of the heat from the chipotle peppers. So you'll get that nice smoky chipotle flavor, but it's not going to be overwhelming. So we've added the juice of 3 limes, and we're just going to mix that in. So there's our guacamole. We're going to come back to this chili so we can give that a stir. That's getting there, folks. That needs a little bit more salt. And we're gonna go ahead and throw another tablespoon of chili powder in there. We're gonna cover that up, and we're gonna take a look at these mushrooms. You've got a nice color. You can see that the sun-dried tomatoes have started to release some of that nice orange over the top. You've got a good amount of color on the blue cheese, and this can go right on our service platter. If you don't have a lot of experience with touching hot things, I would recommend using tongs or a spatula, but I'm pretty hardcore, so I can pull this off. So there's our sinful shrooms, and we're gonna move on to our last item that we haven't even gotten to yet. You have to have some sweetness. We're gonna bring up about a ½ pound of raspberries. I've also got some balsamic vinegar and a little bit of sugar. And this is all we need. We're gonna throw these things in a pan, and it's gonna be a nice little surprise at the end of our meal. I've got a nice warm pan over here. I'm just gonna throw these raspberries right in there. We're gonna add probably about a ½ cup to 3/4 of a cup of balsamic vinegar. The great thing about balsamic vinegar and heat is as it reduces, it gets sweeter and sweeter and sweeter, almost to the point of being like chocolate sweet, and it gets thicker and it works like a syrup. So we're gonna cook that down with these raspberries, and we're also gonna add about a ½ cup of sugar. And we're just gonna throw a lid on that on a medium heat and let that cook down. And in the meantime, we're gonna take a quick break. We'll be right back. So our chili is bubbling away here. We're gonna go ahead and give that a quick taste. That is really good. We're gonna go ahead and add just a little bit of salt. And me personally, even though we've got all those peppers in there, I could use a little bit more heat. So we're gonna add a little bit of cayenne pepper, maybe about another teaspoon. Now we're gonna add our beans. Now I have my beans at the end because I worked with canned beans, which are already fully cooked. I love using canned beans and canned tomatoes for projects like this because it's so convenient and fast. So I've got 2 12-ounce cans of kidney beans and 1 12-ounce can of black beans here. And that's going right into our chili. Because of the thickness of the chili and with the tomato paste in there, those beans are just gonna float right in the middle of everything. And we're just trying to get those hot and ready to go. So we'll reduce the heat just a little bit more and keep that covered while it finishes up. This was our raspberry with balsamic vinegar and some sugar. So we can see it's reduced down. So we've made a nice raspberry balsamic reduction here. And we're gonna make this into a sauce just by straining it out. So here at the table, I've prepped up a cheesecloth over a regular wire strainer. And that's sitting over the top of a bowl. And we're just gonna pour this right into it. And we're just gonna work that through the cloth, scraping back and forth over the surface, moving the seeds out of the way, and allowing for the sauce to drip through. Another technique that you can use with this, since we have a cheesecloth, is we can just gather up the edges and make a little bag. You just kind of twist it around and then put pressure right over the top. And you can see the sauce coming right out the sides of the cheesecloth and into the bowl. We're gonna pop this whole contraption into the fridge. When we come back to it, it'll be nice and drained out and cooled down for us. It smells so good in my house right now. I think this is perfect. You can see a beautiful color. The aroma is incredible. Everything's nice and firm and thick and sticking together in there. You can see as you move it around, the beef and the beans just kind of sit right on top. And that's exactly what you're looking for. I've prepped up a couple of things to serve our chili with. We've got some cilantro, we've got a white onion, some nice sharp cheddar cheese, and some sour cream. So our rock you like a hurricane chili is nice and thick and saucy and ready to go. That is a gorgeous bowl of chili. We have our nice raspberry balsamic reduction that's nice and strained out and smooth, and it's made a nice thick sauce so that we can finish off our nice meal on game day with a Sunday Bloody Sunday. So folks, I'm telling you, we are all set for game day here with our guacamole, our sinful shrooms, this incredible bust you in the eye chili, and our Sunday Bloody Sunday. We've made a great little game time meal for you today here on PDX Stew, friends. I hope you liked hanging out, and I hope you got to learn something. Stay cool, and we'll see you next time.
Are you an artist, musician, or an innovator looking to showcase your work? Have you created a video you'd like to see on the show? Are you looking to address an issue that affects your community? Maybe you'd like to be one of our guest cooks, or just get involved. Folks of all ages, women, people with disabilities, persons of color, and the LGBTQ community are encouraged to reach out. Hit us up at pdxstewshow@gmail.com. Follow us on Facebook for the latest news and events.